plastics to show the animation. And before doing all the work of the wireless communication, we just put wires between the communication. And then the toy company is like, hey, this is awesome with wires. We're just going to go with this. And
small children,
like,
wires?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, whatever. I was working on other stuff at the time. I tried to fight a little bit. Like, really the compelling thing is that you're going to go into Toys R Us, you're going to touch one of these, and then the entire wall of these things are going to start talking because they're all talking or transmitting to each other. Yeah, that would have been pretty magical.
That would have been magical.
They didn't get it, and so they went down this path. And then they decided the wires were a bad idea, which is pretty obvious, right? So they decided to make it standalone, and they're like, well, we don't really like the singing thing. That's already been done. So we're going to call them Rescue Me Pets or something like that. And they're just going to sit there and writhe around and whimper.
Aww.
And it's supposed to make kids love them because they're so
pathetic,
kind of lonely sound or whatever.
Oh.
So the toy came out, and I did some searching around to find it. And the reviews on Amazon were things like, gave this to my son. All it does is whimper, makes my son cry. I tried to turn it off, but there's no off switch.
It sounds like the Furby a little bit. We have 4 Furbies, and one of them doesn't turn off. It just snores. And then after a while it stops. I heard
Runs
that you
out of battery?
Yes. Well, I think it just stops for a while, but if you move too quickly, it will start talking. So, you lay down to go to sleep, and it goes, it scares everyone to death.
The Furby was an awesome toy. I actually know one of the designers of the Furby, and he was telling me the stories of how he took a psychological approach of designing this toy. He identified that there's lots of different types of people. There's like mean people that want to hold it upside down and shake it and just torture it. And there's people that want to coddle it and love it. And so he took all these personality types, and he put some way that you could do that to the Furby. And he made a language, and he very carefully selected these phonemes for the language that sounded like recognizable English, but were complete gibberish. And there was a lot of deliberate stuff in the Furby, and it really shows.
I love the one that's coming out this year. Have you seen the new Furby?
I know. I love that it can like turn mean and sit there and go nya nya nya.
Yeah, and it interacts with your iPad or your iPod, and it learns English. How smart is that?
Brilliant. I'll have to ask Dave if Dave Hampton was the designer, one of the designers of the.
I heard you built a fire-breathing Furby. Oh wait, you're talking. I can't hear
a toy that I'm really disappointed never made it, and this was about 2004, 2005 time when, there were still computers. I mean, still a lot of TVs with composite video in. So I made a virtual pet, which was a Tamagotchi type dongle that had an LCD screen, and then a docking station that hooked up to your television set. And the trick was that your cable box would plug into the docking station, and the docking station would plug into the television, so it passed through.
Oh.
So all video goes through. And then if you plug in your Tamagotchi, your pet can be overlaid onto the live video, and it could come occasionally out onto the screen. And then it would do things like it might poop on the screen, or it might scratch a hole in the screen. It would just be this really cheesy overlay graphics. And you'd have to, use your little remote control or something to interact with it. And then it might leave the screen for a while. But I came up with this way that I would take the closed caption is encoded in the video stream. So I was detecting closed caption, and then I was doing word detection. Well, okay, I'm saying I designed the hardware, software. Software people helped me refine the software. Sorry, software people. I always marginalize you. So this thing, our first test, it looked magical. We had this little dog, and you would hook it up, and we had an old DVD that had like key things in it that we were looking for. So like the word cat would come up, and it would get really excited and try to chase it. There was symbols for musical notes. Mm-hmm. So whenever it saw those, it would come on the screen and do a little dance. And we showed it to the toy guys and a few other people, and they were just like, oh, this is just magical. You're somehow making this pet watch TV. And it was all a little hack. But it never made it because by the time, toy margins are so tight, like a $19 electronic toy, like this joystick thing I was talking about, it has $2 worth of electronics in it. It's $2 electronics, about $1 worth of plastic, $1 worth of packaging and logistics. They figure out shipping and everything right into it. And then toy company doubles that, and that gets you to like $10-ish. And then Walmart doubles that again, and that's $19.
So that's the Target shooting price for
$2, which is a ridiculously low amount of electronics. So on that toy, it was, I had docking stations and infrared remotes.
I see. So it was, that $4 was way over budget.
Exactly. So you can figure exactly how expensive a toy should be or what the retail price should be by the electronics typically. You just keep doubling it up until you make it through the entire supply chain.
What is the coolest thing you've ever engineered, would you say?
Oh my God, I wish I could tell you about the stuff I'm working on now.
Oh.
If my current project, I know I'm just being a tease right now, but if my current project I'm working on makes it, it's going to be the coolest thing. But let me go back. I think the thing I like the most hobby-wise, I made a mechanical shooting gallery that used a photocell gun, like a Nintendo zapper, and I stuck all of the electronics and mechanics inside of an old 19-inch monitor case. So I threw the CRT out, and so there were little doors that would open up, and you would shoot a bad guy behind the door, and then a window would light up, and there'd be a bad guy standing there. And it had the actual score that you were getting. I called it the plinkometer, because it made a plinking mechanical sound. It was a spinning disc that had an arrow indicator on it and a strobe light that would time showing the arrow at the right meter height. Like this meter would be moving up, it would just be advancing the strobe light. I don't know, something about that. I mean, it wasn't very popular. People online looked at the project and they're like, eh. But for me, it was very satisfying. It's like I was half tempted to go to a toy company and say, hey, let's make a version of this.
Yeah.
For kids.
Neat. So this moves us to cool things you're designing right now at Valve. So tell us your job there and what a typical day is like for you.
Yeah, so I wander in about 11 o'clock.
You better be lying.
I'm not lying.
Oh, really?
There's no one. Well, how about I just back up and explain Valve a bit for those that don't understand, and maybe I can get into how they recruited me.
Yes.
So Valve is a flat structure. There's no managers at all. Even Gabe, the founder of the company, can't come in and say, Jeri, I want you to work on this. He can come over and ask me to work on things, and he has, and I've told him yes and no various times. It's very much like the computer stores again. It's like a family. Valve's very careful about the folks that they hire because there's lots of different dimensions they look for when they're hiring folks. You have to be a good communicator. You have to be very broad in your skill set. You can't be very narrow, but you should also have one thing that you're really, really good at, and they call that their T-shape person. So broad and then one really good thing.
Okay.
For me, that's electronics, and then I'm also very broad because I can do a little bit of software. I can do mechanics and optics and other things like that. All the teams are formed organically. So if someone has an idea, they try to prove it out the best they can on their own. So they'll prototype it perhaps in a very crude way, or they'll make a presentation, and then they'll go around the company and they'll show people, hey, look at my idea. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you have any spare time to work on it? And if it's a good idea, people will vote with their time. All the desks are on wheels, so it's very common to be walking through the halls and you'll see someone pushing a desk down the hall with their computer monitors all attached to it. And it's really, really cool because people will move their desks close to each other. So you might have an artist next to a programmer, next to a level designer, and they'll just they'll circle their wagons, and they'll work really close together for a couple weeks, and they'll solve this thing that they're working on, and then they'll disband, and then, the people will go off and work with other folks.
Do you end up having people that you just want to hang out with more, and you kind of have, this is the little desk area for these people, or do people like their space and then they just move for projects?
I do. I am pretty new. There is a bit of there's people that have their favorites. So I've heard, like, Joe Blow always comes with this other person.
Okay.
That's like they're the team, and they're going to stick together no matter what they do. So that kind of stuff exists.
Do you have plugs like every 20 feet? How do you work that with all the rotating desks?
Yeah. The rooms they call them cabals. They're huge open rooms with lots of outlets and Ethernet jacks. And so there's big open spaces. So the shape of the room changes. I mean, our hardware lab just completely reconfigured a week ago. It's like, wow. Some folks down the hall from a different cabal were teasing us, like, well, every time I come in here, it's a different shape. It's like,
keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's not always the most efficient, I've found, but I think it's optimized for several things. Employee happiness, which that's so important. I've worked at tons and tons of companies as a contractor, and if I'm miserable at a company, I'm not going to go the extra distance to fight for anything. Like the dancing dog thing, I just wasn't happy with those guys. So it's like, all right, you can have it. I'm not going to fight to keep this feature in. I don't think that would happen around Valve because people are really happy, and it's an open environment where everyone's encouraged to communicate openly. For instance, each cabal has outside, there's a magnetic wall where you can put up your concept art or concepts. And people are encouraged to look at those and then wander into the cabal and find the person responsible and give them feedback. And it happens a lot. People wander through all the time into our cabal. And that's part of the thing that I mean, it's maybe not the most efficient in the short term, but I think in the long run, it's more efficient having that connection with everyone, because you were working maybe on an input device or something, and someone sees our concept and they'll wander in and they'll want to play with it. And I'd much rather just keep designing on it. But, it's kind of the culture around here. It's like I stop what I'm doing, and then, or not, and let them try it out and then get their feedback, and then, yeah.
So without a manager or somebody to review you and your work, is it the affirmation of your fellow engineers and fellow people working there that's pretty much the motivator for joining other people's projects, and other than the reward of doing your work and really loving the product?
Yeah, so there's a yearly review, which is all your peers, people that work directly with you. So they gather up information about what worked well and what didn't. It's supposed to be positive. And then that's all aggregated, and then someone unrelated to your group gives the feedback to you and everyone in the group. And you're expected to make changes on that. Like if there's a red flag in there, then you should start addressing those things. And if it just keeps coming up year after year, well, then there's problems. And there is HR people around here, people that have fallen into that role. People really don't have titles around here either, which is interesting. It's, if I wanted to go work on a game and I felt that was the most valuable thing I could do with my time is go help with a game in some way, no one's going to stop me. They may question me a lot, and I mean that's it. No one tells you not to do anything, but people question you a lot. It's like if people are questioning you a lot, it makes you stop and think about it. And sometimes that has caused me to change direction. Sometimes it hasn't.
It sounds like you have to be very